experimenting is something that we love to do at Chili Piper. And we actually created a program when I was back in content marketing called Chili Experiments, where we document all of the experiments that we're doing across the company into articles, and then we share them across LinkedIn. LinkedIn is usually our main channel for that.
Hey, I'm Corrina.
And I'm Taylor.
And this is Direct, a podcast we created to showcase the creativity and hard work of go-to-market teams everywhere.
We're here to share the stories and experiences of the hardworking, passionate individuals who make up go-to-market teams, the ones who truly make the magic happen.
Taylor and I have been fortunate enough to work side by side on some incredible projects together, and now we want to put a spotlight on the unsung heroes behind some of the best go-to-market campaigns out there.
In each episode, you'll hear from individual contributors who have gone above and beyond to make a difference. They'll share their challenges, victories, and the lessons they've learned along the way, all to help you unlock the next step in your career. Get ready to be inspired, learn something new, maybe even share a laugh or two.
Welcome to Direct. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Direct. I am here with my co-host, Taylor Young.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yes, and we're so thrilled, of course, to have a fabulous guest on with us, and that is none other than Madeleine Work. She is currently the product marketing manager at Chili Piper. She actually transitioned from content marketing to product marketing early this year. She's also a mom to a 1.5-year-old, and she speaks fluent Mandarin Chinese, and she speaks it with her husband, her in-laws, and her baby, which is just so freaking adorable. I think you should do some more video content around that, side note. And this is especially interesting that you may not know Madeline. She actually was crowned a champion of a spicy food eating competition in college. She was living in Cambodia at the time, and she was tired of being made fun of for not being able to eat spicy food. So she built up her tolerance and showed them all wrong, and totally on brand for now being at Chili Piper. Madeline, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What a great intro. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got a really interesting background. What brought you to Cambodia?
My mom is an anthropologist and she did her fieldwork in Cambodia. And so after after high school, I lived there for a year teaching English and building up my tolerance for spicy food.
Well, I was going to ask, have you ever tried the Hot Ones challenge? I'm sure you probably have.
I haven't tried the Hot Ones challenge, but I should definitely do that.
You must. I think I'd be very curious about your take on the bomb in particular, because that just tastes like death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I will do it and I will report back.
All right, perfect. Okay, so Madeline, before we get into all of your fabulous work and everything that you've been doing at Chili Piper and beyond, we ask all our guests the same question, and that is, Taylor, for my visual, please. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything about your life, your job, your career, your role, how it's perceived, we could go on and on and on. But if you had that magic wand, Madeline, what would you choose?
This is a great question, and I've been thinking about it a lot over the last week. For my job, I wish that there were a magic button that I could give to other people to automatically get their feedback from their head and put it into like a document or something. Because getting feedback on things like competitive landing pages, articles, messaging, launch plans, etc., is such an important part of my job. But every time I ask for feedback, I'm basically just asking people for their time. So I wish I could just like give them a button that they could push, and then I would get all the feedback and they wouldn't have to spend 10, 15 minutes compiling everything. And for my life, I wish that I could apparate like in Harry Potter. I could go, because I have friends and family all over the world. So I wish I could just like apparate and go to Boston and hang out with my friend for a couple of hours and then come back to Portland.
I appreciate the magic wand being used for both aspects. And I think that it really speaks to what you've been creating over there. So that dovetails really nicely into our campaign. So we will revisit that at the bottom of the hour. Taylor and I will be sure to chime in with our thoughts on how we can make that magic wand a reality. So let's jump into Chili Piper. I think what most people know and love about your brand is that there does seem to be a lot of experimentation happening. You guys try a lot of things. I mean, most recently, I love just the simplicity of being at Inbound and writing chalk messages on the streets leading up to Inbound. I mean, such low effort, so creative, so human, speaks to so much nostalgia. And I could go on and on and on about all the different campaigns. But specifically, can you speak to us and our audience about how you have worked on this experimentation process at Chili Pepper? What are some campaigns that immediately come to mind when we talk about that?
So experimenting is something that we love to do at Chili Piper. And we actually created a program when I was back in content marketing called Chili Experiments, where we document all of the experiments that we're doing across the company into articles, and then we share them across LinkedIn. LinkedIn is Julie, our main channel for that. And I love that because we're doing so many cool things at Chili Piper. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of cool ideas and a lot of good things to say, but they just struggle with like taking the idea and putting it on paper. So I loved being that like extractor and writer for them. Oh, different kind of really cool stuff about like why we always demo on the first call, why we don't do get discounts, how we booked a bunch of meetings at Inbound. Like anything that we do that's different, we write about it and share with everyone. And it's just so refreshing because I came from the content marketing world. I work in positions where I've had to write like 4 articles a month about something that I have absolutely zero authority to write about. Like if you told me to write an article about cold calling tips, like I have zero authority to tell anyone how to cold call. Like I've never cold called anyone in my life. So any tips I have are completely meaningless.
Well, I love that you call that out actually, because I think that what you're actually trying to overcome, it sounds like internally, is this notion that somebody has zero autonomy or ability to add input just because they've never done it. It sounds like this documentation that's shared internally is kind of seeking to undo that thought process that we all might have. Like, nope, I haven't done enough speaking engagements. I'm not fit to be, doing a speaking engagement. No, I haven't done cold calling, so I don't have any input into ideas into a content calendar for this, but we've all been cold called too. So I feel like this notion in itself is almost dispelling this notion internally that somebody has zero ability to contribute. Would you agree with that? Or how do you find that, being like the extractor of that? How have you encouraged people to kind of tune down those filters internally and feel comfortable and confident to put out their ideas for all of the organization to see and potentially judge?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who feel like people think that writing is like this mystical power that only a few of us can tap, and that to be a writer, you need to have like perfect grammar, impeccable vocabulary, and all of this like unreachable things, basically. And that's just not true. I think if you can talk, you can write. And if you have something to say, then you should say it. And so I loved being the in-between person to convince people like, yes, you can write, like you have something to say, this is super interesting, nobody's talking about this, nobody else is writing about this, and just try, like just write the way that you talk, and then I can help like refine it a little bit for you and create like organization and sections and like help you through the process. But you just have to, like, writing is really just a muscle that you have to keep exercising, and the more you write, the better you get. It's not like some magical mystical thing that nobody can ever achieve.
I love the point, just write how you talk or talk how you write, either way. Doing this and being so open and vulnerable, especially with the experiments that you're running, did you have to get a lot of buy-in to kind of pull the team along to start publishing the type of work that you're doing? Or, because your audience is cool, hip, B2B sales, B2B marketing, like, was that a little bit easier?
I think it was really easy because we had a buy-in from the executive level. So Nicola and Alina, who are the co-founders and co-CEOs at Chili Piper, they're very transparent in general, and they're very big into sharing what we're doing with everyone. They think that's really important, and they have very few limits on what they think is appropriate to share with everyone. So having that executive buy-in is very important. I've worked at companies where like we couldn't really share screenshots of the product, or we didn't really want to share too much because maybe our competitors would see it and they would copy us. But at Chili Piper, it's much more, we're just very open and transparent. And that's something that comes from the top down.
I think too, what blends, and I mean, just in my initial mind, makes me think that there was this muscle, or, you've sharpened this muscle, was when you were talking about asking the right questions to get people to share and communicate their ideas in written form. I feel like that blends really well into like the core function of the core purpose of what product marketers do, right? Like they exist to communicate value, to communicate effectively a customer's desires, wishes, and needs in the product or the solution. Are there any questions that you found really help draw out those insights? Or are there any questions you feel like that exist that are really common nomenclature inside Chili Piper that kind of lead to this really experimentative and, everybody has something to contribute type of environment?
So the questions that I would ask people when I was trying to pull the experiments out of, and also what I ask doing customer stories and things like that, is for people to tell me a specific example. They say like, we improved efficiency. I'm like, well, can you tell me a specific example of how you improved efficiency, or like a story when you noticed that efficiency was improved? Because literally, like, if you're a software and you're not improving efficiency, like, you're not a real software. Like, every software is about improving efficiency. So that doesn't really say anything. And another thing I learned that is really, really hard for me is just pausing, like asking a question and not saying anything after, just pausing, because people will say something, or like after they finish a thought, waiting a little bit until you ask the next question, because usually they have things on their mind, or people are thinking through things. They have something else that they want to say and add on to, but it's so hard. Like, I always want to fill the silence, but it really is so important to just give people that time to talk.
That's something that we're trying to play here too. Is there's this need to like instantly, be together and be like, yes, I totally understand. And yes, I totally empathize and I can totally relate. But there's beauty in pausing and allowing that silence to exist so that people can continue that train of thought that's not coming out verbally at the moment.
Yeah, it's so hard and I'm not very good at it, but it's like such an important skill to practice.
And to Corrina's point, I think I'm listening to you and I'm feeling we have the same struggle with the podcast, because we pull in people who are individual contributors that a lot of time are like, why would I come on there? Like, what do I have to say? But then when we get them on here and we get them talking, the how behind the things they've achieved is so incredibly cool and innovative and interesting for people to hear about. So for people who are not confident when you approach them, do you have any really specific guidance on how to get them to feel more confident or feel open to talking to you?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's always easiest. I've gotten pushback where people are like, well, I don't think I can write an article about that, or I don't really think I have anything to say. So I'm like, well, maybe we can just get on a call and we can talk through it and see if there's anything here. So I just get on a call and I ask them questions, like specifics, kind of like what you just asked me, like specifically, how did you do this? Like, what was the process? Do you have any documents that lays it out? Like, do you have an example of how you did it? And of course they do. They did the thing. Like, there's just always things that you can share. There's always documents. So usually getting people on a call and being able to talk through it and like ask specific, very, very specific questions and examples about things, that usually pulls out the story.
Well, speaking of documenting your processes, you've recently done this to collect feedback around messaging and positioning. And I came across this from one of your LinkedIn posts, and I was just so impressed with your ability to very quickly communicate in the post the problem you had, how you overcame it, and then the process that you were willing to share with everyone about how you actually went about collecting and organizing and gathering all this feedback. Messaging and positioning is a team sport. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It's a lot of opinions, and it's really hard to wrangle that all in. So would love to know, like, take us back to the genesis of this. What were you tasked with, and what were some of the challenges that you kept coming across that you eventually led to the creation of this process?
Perfect. So we're launching a new product early next year, and I was tasked with building out the positioning and messaging document for this new product and all of the assets that would go with this. So the new product page and any ads we would do, et cetera. And the product that we're building is for end users, specifically for any customer-facing reps. So account executives, SDRs, CSMs, anyone who's customer-facing can use our product. And we have so many customer-facing reps within Chili Piper. So I was like, there's got to be a way that we can involve the people at Chili Piper who are all brilliant in the process for a product that is for them. So when I was trying to build out this exercise, or when you're building out any brainstorm, you need to think of how you can make that room for creativity while also boxing people into constraints to let people be creative. Because if you just ask someone to come up with a good idea, what kind of idea? An idea about what? So like, I tried to create constraints, but also allow for that creativity. So I had a few ideas in which direction the messaging could go in. So I was thinking you could either do like a persona first messaging, a competitor first messaging, or a value first messaging. And so I created this document and I shared an example of what each of those. I shared an example of an H1, like why this message would be a good idea or why it might be a bad idea, and like some background information. So for example, to persona focused, my H1 was the only smart scheduler for customer facing reps. My optimistic hypothesis was that if we speak directly to our target persona, they'll be more likely to see themselves as users. And my pessimistic hypothesis is that we'd box ourselves into a persona. So in April Benford's obviously awesome. She has a really great example where she says, if you market yourself as a fishnet for tuna, then like maybe you're a great fishnet for tuna, but maybe you could also be good for grouper or salmon. I know nothing about fish. Maybe there's like other fish that you can catch in your net. But if you market yourself as a fishnet for tuna, then you're only going to catch tuna, or you're only going to sell to people who want to catch tuna. So I went through all of this, the persona, the competitor, the value focus, and I created a table where people could add their own ideas. For the H1, I used H1 specifically. We already had the product page laid out, so I took a screenshot of what the H1 would look like. And I feel like that's something that everyone could relate to. I feel like coming up with a messaging framework is kind of abstract for someone who's not in marketing. So I thought like something that was a little bit more concrete that people deal with on a day-to-day basis, like a product page or like a landing page, it would be a little bit easier to like again, like narrow the limits so that they could be a little bit more creative within confines. So I created a table with all of the H1 ideas, the persona, the competitor, and the value focused. And then I asked everyone to fill out the table with their ideas. I gave people a week. And so at the end of the week, we got like 40 different H1s across the different messaging types. And then I asked people to go in and vote with the emoji reaction on Google Docs. And so we took the top message from each of those and then we ran it through Winter. And after that, we found the persona messaging got 50% of the votes in Winter, and then the value messaging got 43% of the votes in Winter. So as we do this, like as we launch the product, we'll continue to do the A/B testing. Like we have Mutiny, so we'll use Mutiny to A/B test the different messages on the product page. We'll do ad testing. We'll try it in different sales pitches. But like, so it's an iterative process and it's going to keep going. But it was just really cool to collect ideas from across the entire company, because I really believe that the best ideas come from where you're least expecting it. And a lot of times as marketers, we kind of just get into a brainstorm room with other marketers and we just like market together. And like we just, it's really fun to bring in ideas from other people across the company because.
Well, I don't want to like skip, hop past this beautiful idea of kind of breaking the way that, you know, us marketers do with positioning templates. Like we have a positioning template. We know how to fill that out. We know how to structure it. And you kind of just tore that up, which I love, and realized that presenting a visual in a way that your audience would immediately understand a H1, which is like the title, the main title you see across your page in a product page format. What spawned that idea? What made you go straight to that versus kind of the tried and true method that we've all been taught how to do?
So I was tasked with putting together the Chili Column positioning messaging doc, and I put it together and I shared it with the sales leaders and the customer success leaders. And I just got a ton of feedback back. And it was very overwhelming because the feedback was contradictory. And like Nikolai, was the CEO, was saying one thing, but then VP of sales was saying something else. And like everyone had their own ideas about, I'm like, okay, let's start over. So I did this like crowdsourced messaging. So I'm like, okay, so everyone has an opinion. Everyone's opinion is valid. And let's try to put some kind of data behind it. So like something like positioning and messaging. I guess messaging is very subjective until you start doing A/B testing and you start actually like trying it out. At the beginning, you're just like, well, I think this would work. This seems like it would work. So with doing the crowdsourced approach and having everyone share their ideas and vote on it, it kind of put a little bit of data behind it. And then running it through Winter, it also made it a more of a data-backed choice rather than just like, I think this would be good. The other thing about messaging is when I worked in content marketing, I would get messaging docs from the product marketers and I just wouldn't know what to do with them. Like I would just be like, this is a document. And like, I'm like, what does this mean? Like, what am I supposed to, like, am I supposed to write something with this? Like, this is just jargon. Like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to take this and apply it to what I'm doing. So like, I would always prefer to start with like my personal preference is to start with a landing page. Like, start with the landing page. This is the messaging. This is what we're going to do. And then take that and make a framework like from the landing page, but then share both at the same time. Like, this is the landing page. It's the practical application. And also here's the framework. But I always start with the actual asset.
You're starting with a very visual asset. And in my mind, that speaks to like a very common learning style, right?
Mhm.
Is that we often need to be, I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I learn best when I'm doing something.
I'm auditory, completely opposite. I can't handle
Yes.
anything
Wow.
visual.
Interesting. So yeah, so you took the visual aspect, which I do think it's the most common
Mhm.
learning style, and applied, like you've already kind of, like you've been saying a lot too, you've been working backwards. Like, how can I get them to arrive at a point that you're not trying to say for them, but you're trying to give them those guardrails? And you did that a lot by making the framework something that was more universally accepted and easier to grasp. Do you think any of that comes from your teaching background as well? Like, did you maybe pick up some how to display and get feedback, how to convey a concept from that background in teaching?
I think from teaching, you just learn to go very slowly and break things down into very bite-sized pieces and never assume that everything is understood, because there's always going to be someone that doesn't know what's happening. And people don't ask questions. There's always, maybe if there's a class of 10 people, like 3 of them are going to ask questions and the rest are going to either feel too stupid or too shy or too awkward. So creating space to ask questions in a non-public forum is something that's important for teaching. And also with anything, like what now in Slack, it's easy. So like, you can just Slack me your questions, or you like DM me. You don't have to make it in a public forum. But yeah, creating a space for questions, and also trying to answer questions before they come up, which can really be hard.
I love that you've created this framework not only to make it easy and digestible for different people to contribute, to really break it away from like the traditional way that, marketers only contributing to the brand and to the message, but also creating a really safe space for vulnerability in asking questions. You mentioned jargon and the idea of crowdsourcing the information from the people who use the tool, whether that's internally or from your customers. Being able to make sure that you're ripping that jargon away from it so that everybody can understand. I think that's just such a cool way to think about it and to create these kind of frameworks. And you also mentioned A/B testing. So I really want to know kind of what kind of results did you end up seeing from those tests?
We haven't started A/B testing yet. The
Okay.
product is going to be launching in Q1 of next year. So that's when we'll really, so we're not driving traffic to the page yet, but I'm
Do you
excited.
have any assumptions or that you expect just
I don't
based on what you've been able
know.
to get internally?
So when I did the winter test, I did it mostly for customer facing reps. That was my target. And then the results were that the persona messaging got the most votes. So I
Mhm.
wonder if we do it just on the landing page, if the value messaging will get more of the votes. Because if it's a targeted persona on winter, then maybe they will resonate more with the persona first messaging. So I'm curious to see if those numbers will switch, or if like we knew our persona from the beginning and we were right on, and like maybe that'll skyrocket. I don't know.
In
I'm
the
curious to
essence
see.
of, being vulnerable and being open, can you explain to any of our listeners that is not understanding what you mean by the winter test? Like, what was that process?
Yeah. So the winter test, winter is a platform that's for messaging tests. So with the landing page, with the product page specifically, I was able to upload 3 different screenshots with 3 different messages and choose an audience of my target persona, which in our case was sales reps. So I chose an audience of 15 sales reps, and they were able to choose which of the 3 messages they liked the most and why they liked them. It's a great tool. Like, it's so great for just getting that qualitative feedback. Because if you do something like Mutiny, you can get the quantitative feedback, like, oh, like more people click the CTA with this. But if you combine that with the qualitative message, with the qualitative tests on winter, because they have to leave, it's a certain character amount of feedback. So you get that like qualitative of like, I liked it because blah, 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 or I didn't like this because blah, 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 which is just really really valuable.
I thank you for sharing that explanation. I think having that combo is really helpful and a really good formula to look back on. Since this is V1, so we basically done the crowdsourcing effort, you've done the fabulous work of making this like a process and a template. What does V2 look like? Since obviously we're going to get that feedback back, maybe make some adjustments, and then maybe even expand the buying committee for this product later. Have you thought about how you plan to evolve this process and what the next round might look like for iteration?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think with messaging, it's an constantly evolving process. And so as we get more data from the A/B testing and also product data about who's actually using our product, how they're using it, customer feedback, et cetera, we'll just be able to go into a new direction. So maybe we would do this crowdsourced messaging again, but with different frameworks. So I had the persona, value, competitor focus. So maybe I would have different focuses and we can repeat the experiment. Or we can do maybe just like a full landing page teardown or like different features that people are resonating with and not resonating with. That's something I think the best really valuable feedback I get from the sales team is features that we think are really cool on the marketing side. And when they pitch them to customers, they're like, nobody cares that. Or like maybe 2 out of 100 people think this is cool, but it's not really valuable. So when we get to that point of like people actually using our features and like trying it out and doing it in their day-to-day, like we can get a little bit more granular on the overall page.
I'm excited for V2. And I'm excited too, because maybe even before V2, there's an opportunity for you to really interface with product. So I think you've created a very product forward, product centric process here as far as how are we collecting feedback around this product that we're trying to bring to market? What should that positioning look like? You've already been a step ahead than I think most marketers by making this very digestible, as if the product was ready to go to market today and you're just getting feedback on it. You're kind of a step ahead with a process like this because you're really stepping into the shoes of the persona, but also to the people that you're trying to get feedback from. And eventually, a lot of this feedback is going to be sent to the product team to actually put this in motion, develop it. What would you say are like some recommendations you would give to other product marketers out there who maybe want to try a process like this for getting positioning and messaging and feedback going forward? What would you say are some like key things to be aware of when interfacing with the product team around giving them this type of feedback back?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think working with the product team at Chili Piper has been a gift because they are brilliant and they have planned everything so wonderfully and they're getting so much feedback from the customers and the people who are actual users. And so I think from the product marketing perspective, what we can really bring is being able to bring the rest of the company together and get feedback from the rest of the company and enable the rest of the company and also like put these things into motion in the actual market. So the product managers, they know their product, they know how it compares to the other products and the features that we need to be competitive. And then the marketers, we really know how we can speak to the people that we're actually buying to. And so in my situation, we are selling to people who work at Chili Piper. So we're selling to the account executives, so the SDRs, the CSMs, like we're selling to those types of people at other companies. So talking to them about what makes sense, what resonates, what doesn't resonate, like what feels icky, what feels fun, like those kinds of things is super, super valuable. And I'm sure that there's probably a few people at your company, at least a few people at your company who really, really understand your persona. Maybe they've lived in those personas' shoes. Maybe they are that persona. Maybe they just have a really close relationship with that persona. So as a product marketer, you should really try to build a relationship with those types of people and then take that feedback back to the product team, because the product team, they don't really interface with the persona as much as product marketers do.
Love all of the summary of the all of the concepts that you brought to us today, and it brings me back around to our original question that we asked regarding our magic wand here. So we asked you, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about your role or your life? I don't know how to provide you a magical apparition device. Even this magic wand, won't quite do it. But in your role, you mentioned like a button, an easy button, an automatic pass to get the information, the feedback from other people out of their head into reality with no time needed at all. And I'm really curious, based on the conversation that we talked about today, it seems like you've really worked toward that with some of these frameworks. But have you heard anything in this conversation that might help you create that magic wand for yourself, create and solve that problem? And I know Corrina always has a really fantastic idea, and I have some thoughts myself. But before we do that, anything coming up from this conversation that you may have that inside yourself already?
I don't know. It's really challenging because when I've asked for feedback, people give me like very, very detailed feedback in a doc. Or they're like, well, they go like one by one, each thing they like, this, we don't want this, I want this. So they take screenshots and they like cross out and write what they want. And it's very time consuming. It's
Mm-hmm.
very super, like very helpful feedback. And I really appreciate it. But I wish I could take that. Like, I don't have an idea for how I can just take that and have it, have it without them spending all the time.
I'm sure I want to let Corrina go because I know she always has fantastic answers for these. But I think that I just wanted to praise you for a second and say like the framework that you've created already to open it up and allow a lot of people to contribute, allow people to be vulnerable, allow them to work asynchronously so that they can not feel time constrained, like time bounding it, but also not putting people on the spot so they can do it in their own way. I think that's a really valuable way that you've started to create this. And I can't wait to hear what Corrina has to say about how to improve on it, because she always does.
Well, I don't know if it's that much better, but I was thinking about how we live in this AI world where we're trying to automate processes. And what I do know is that you clearly have a very solid understanding of not only your personas that buy from you, but your personas in your company at Chili Piper. So I feel like maybe you could create a prompt to give to maybe a chat GPT or another that says, you are Alina. You are a very busy C-level executive. You're constantly on the road, but you have so many ideas. Your interests are in AI and expanding your product, growing the business to X. You are tasked with getting this feedback or giving this feedback to Madeline. What are the top 3 things that Alina is most likely to do based on these characteristics about her, this personality, these job constraints? What is she most likely to do first to make the assumption for you? Because you'll have all that data to give the prompt, right? So you've almost created like a Alina template for the prompt. And then maybe your product marketing template and your VP template, and give them all those parameters that you already know. It already exists in your head, that they could start to kind of edit down for them. So you could almost give the assumptions back to whoever you're trying to collect feedback from first. Like, I think you might notice this, or I think you might recommend this. What do you think about that?
That's very interesting. I should definitely try that. I feel like Alina has sent me an AI tool that does something very similar. Like you can build out personas and then ask them specific questions about like landing pages or messaging or something. I haven't actually tried it out. So I will do that and see where we get.
Because I feel like you said, it's so much work to collect all of that and analyze it. But if you gave it those characteristics that live inside of your brain based on your years of working with them, that maybe you could get some assumptions. Now, maybe this could go totally haywire. Maybe the person receiving those assumptions is going to be like, excuse me, no, it is not at all what I would have wanted, whatever. And then we can just blame it on AI. But yeah, I feel like your process is there to where you could almost make it a machine and just put in those internal assumptions and biases and backgrounds that you already know that could then get to where their opinion might lie. And then you could come on top of that and then maybe even edit it further and then ask that edited feedback back to them. So cutting down some process there or some time.
It's very interesting. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, we have to end all our podcast episodes with somebody telling me that my idea is really great. So perfect. Job well done. Well, Madeline, thank you so much. We will be sure to put a link to the post from your LinkedIn post of where you actually outline this process, and you would be willing to share the documentation too, I'm sure, with the listeners. But I just want to commend you for thinking outside of the box. You are clearly a creative professional, and you have a very mindset for data and process. And so, it makes perfect sense that you're able to come up with some amazing creative campaigns like this. And so thank you for being a pioneer for how we should be thinking about positioning and collecting feedback.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. It was so much fun to chat with you guys.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Direct with Corrina and Taylor.
If you enjoyed what you heard in today's episode, please give us a follow, maybe even a 5-star review, wherever you listen to your podcast.
And if you know someone that you'd like to spotlight, if you want to share your own story, visit us at motionagency.io/direct. We'd love to hear from you.